Thank you, Imam. And now we are into the end of our first section with our panel discussion. So I would like to respectfully ask our respected speakers to join me on the panel. And introducing two more of our speakers to the panel who will address the audience for a few minutes before we start the discussion that's going to be moderated by the Detroit organizer, Mr. Alauddin Barakat. And so Dr. Imam, if you please would join us, and Dr. Adnan Jaber, Mr. Sohail Ahmad. And we have with us in the audience Mr. Ahmad Kharoubi, who's an engineer and a person who's very well acquainted with modern technology. He didn't send me his bio, so I apologize, but please join us on the panel. And also Dr. Abbas Yousef, who's a research engineer at Ford Motor Company, where he develops control algorithms for autonomous vehicles. He has a Ph.D. in electrical engineering, and his dissertation was on neural networks and design of computer algorithms mimicking how the brain processes information. He is a researcher and an inventor. He also taught as an adjunct faculty at Wayne State University for over 20 years. He promotes reason and logic as a free thinker. He supports freedom of speech, secular society, and would like to be known as a soldier for social justice. With no further ado, Mr. Ala will take over the discussion. There will be a section where we will have the audience engage with the panel, and this is our favorite part. You can have, we'll have the mic around, and this will go to about 12:30, 12:15, 12:30. So we have at least 30 to 45 minutes for lunch.
Hello, everyone. That was gracious. All right. So we're going to start the panel discussion. We want the discussion to really come down to whether or not science and Islam can coexist. So I'd like to actually throw that question out. I know some of you some of our panelists seem to think that Islam and science cannot coexist, while others, it seems like they do think that it does. They can, coexist. So I want to throw the question out there to our panelists. We can probably start from our first panelist all the way down. So the question is up to you. Can Islam and science coexist? Oh, all right.
So, give some background about myself. As Wissam said, I'm an engineer. I've been with General Motors for 9 years now. Born and raised in Lebanon, I went to Al-Mustafa schools for my entire life. So now, at some point, I went from being religious. I was raised in a very religious home, to atheist. Today, I would say agnostic, Muslimish. I know a lot about Islam. I practice a lot of, I take what I like in Islam and I leave behind stuff that I question. With that said, I probably would be a very excellent Muslimish. So to answer your question in regards to can Islam and science coexist, my outlook has changed in regards to why do we exist and why do we make these questions. As Dr. Jaber said, from science. Science has to be about happiness and the good of humanity. And I personally, after 34 years or 34 turns around the sun, I've come down to what matters really in life is what our eternal goal is, just happiness. Whatever we do on a daily basis, every decision that we make is because it makes us happy at one level or another. And with that said, once you scope it properly, I think that they can coexist, right? That's my take on, from, I would say being agnostic, leaning towards the existence of God, because that makes me happy. That satisfies me. It finds a natural medium for me between science and religion. I don't have to choose either or. I can choose both. And that decision boiled down to scientifically. I disagree with atheists. They cannot prove that, they looked everywhere for God, just from a scientific methodology. And from a spiritual, religious manner, I also am not convinced from that, there's no proof, or the proof that it exists in the scripts has just not been convincing enough. Probable, plausible, I agree. And that's where I can't sell what I don't know. I can't convince anybody of what I don't know, but I can definitely, I definitely think that science and religion can coexist, because we do need spirituality. We do need a basis. If you look at today's laws, from a civilization standpoint, there's a precursor for those, which is the religion. And to just go off and say everything in religion is wrong or bad, that is absolutely incorrect. That's my take. I have a daughter, a 3-year-old, and I'm raising her today as a Muslim, but I'm also equipping her with the scientific methodology and understanding, so that when she is of age where she can make the decision for herself to question, I ask her to question me, I question her, and I want her to question reality in a manner that, just like I understood after 34 years, that it's all about being happy. And sometimes you have to make tough decisions to eventually, guarantee that outcome. I want her to be happy. What path she chooses, that's fine. But what I can tell you is, I chose for my daughter a coexistent world in my house between science and religion, and Islam to be specific, because I want to equip her with good morals, good tradition, culture, and background. And before, there has to be an invisible police, until at some point she can go off in the world on her own and make that decision for herself. Thank you.
Thank you. We're actually going to give the microphone to Dr. Abbas Yousef. Just Dr. Abbas?
Yes.
Yeah, if you would like to introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Thank you very much. Good morning, all. Before I start, I salute the revolt of the people of Lebanon and their struggle to get rid of a religious, corrupt government and move towards a secular, accountable system and government. Thanks to Muslimish for giving me the opportunity to be part of this panel with such distinguished professionals. And thank you all for coming here to share and discuss such an interesting topic. I hesitated at first to tackle such a sensitive subject. Then I accepted, with understanding of my responsibility as an engineer and scientist in this community, to share my experience and knowledge and thoughts. So I approached the discussion of this subject with an open mind and hope to contribute with the same level of commitment to open-mindedness, because the advancement of the society at large depends on it. So, Can Islam and science coexist? It seems yes, because they have been coexisting for years. Science is the process and tools used to learn how the world around us works. On the other hand, Islam is a religion, as defined by dictionary.com, a set of beliefs concerning the cause, nature, and purpose of the universe, especially when considered as the creation of a superhuman, usually involving devotional and ritual observances, and often containing a moral code governing the conduct of human affairs. It is also stated as the service and worship of God or the supernatural. Nobel Prize-winning theoretist and physicist Steven Weinberg, in an interview with National Geographic magazine, explains, "We scientists pull things together into theories from which we derive consequences and then check those consequences against both observation and experiment, modifying our theories when necessary." In addition, Einstein also wrote, "All knowledge of reality starts from experience and ends in it." Human beings and all living things with different degrees of sensitivity to their surroundings are aware of all that surroundings through interpretation of all signals of our awareness, and then deduce an outcome based on certain preconditioning knowledge and experiences. Humans have worshipped rains, clouds, the sun, the moon, the thunders, fire, and the stars because of misconception. Merriam-Webster defines misconception as a belief, an idea that is wrong, incorrect, and unexplainable in any factual terms. People have moved to believe in other invisible supernatural as the absolute answer. So, to answer the question, can Islam and science coexist? The answer is yes. They have been coexisting for years. As the physicist Weinberg said also, throughout history, scientists from Islamic countries, faithful or not, have contributed to the advancement of science because they were doing science for the sake of science and nothing else. That is where I would ask, is Islam using science to prove all of its claims? If yes, then not only Islam, but all religions will be disappointed because most main claims can never be scientifically proven, regardless of the efforts. With all due respect to all what's been said. People believe religious claims by faith and don't need proof, and that's it. Does Islam or other religions, for that matter, offer answers about the absolute truth regarding all natural phenomena in our world? Well, the truth is the degree to which a statement corresponds with reality. Reality is limited to that which is directly perceivable through our natural senses, or indirectly ascertained through the proper use of reason. Dan Barker defines reason as a tool of critical thought that limits the truth of a statement according to the strict tests of the scientific method. For a statement to be considered true, it must be testable, falsifiable, and logical. For example, water molecule is made of 1 oxygen and 2 hydrogen molecules. I can test it, prove it, and then take it as principle to compare it when need arises. The role of science is to understand the world we live in. It is a journey to discover all the principles that governs our world through experimentation and observation. Scientists want to know the cause and effect of certain action, growth, existence, etc. The two are different. Science is the knowledge to confirm and observe through experimentation, and religion is by faith without experimentation or observation. Religion is more about observance and less about observation. Thus, answering the question if they can coexist, the answer is yes, as long as the scientists do science for the sake of science and religious authorities do not interfere. If one day science found the secret of life and create life, then either that discovery becomes the proof to the religious claims or disprove it. At the end, science is governed by rules and ethics to discover reality and truth, but religion is governed by rules and principles that are taken by faith. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor. So it seems like that religion or Islam in this specific case and science can coexist from a subjective point of view. It's more of a choice of a person to probably take certain aspects of science and certain aspects of Islam and make them coexist. But from an objective point of view, it doesn't sound like they can coexist. I would like to ask Dr. Sohail, one thing that's striking is that you've talked about the metaphors, probably the symbolism of in Islam, and how even if people try to say that this is just a metaphor, it kind of like still contradicts itself. However, Dr. Ahmad, he disagrees with you. I would like to give you the chance to actually respond to that, if possible.
So I look at it as, as I said in my talk, at a superficial level, coexistence, cherry picking the things that fit, ignoring or suppressing the things that don't fit. Sure, we can have coexistence. That's pretty superficial. I don't think it's that interesting. But I think, and I'm guessing most of us would agree here, the more interesting question is there a conflict underneath? And for that, I would say there is, because if we are saying there's no conflict because we just define our way out of a conflict and subjectively go to a warm and fuzzy place where there's no conflict, that's not an objective assessment actually answering the question. That's just about how do we create a world perhaps where we're seeking happiness, which is a noble goal. But I think believing in something because it comforts us versus believing in something because it's true, however we pursue that or define that, that truth is more important than comfort. My philosophy is, let's figure out what's true, and then let's build comfort on top of that, instead of chasing comfort and running away from truth in order to embrace what's just familiar, what we've been indoctrinated into, or what our current paradigms may be from the cultures from which we've hailed. So I don't know if that sort of directly addressed the point you were asking.
Yeah, that's great. My question is in the case that they do not exist and people accept that notion, how can science perhaps fill the void of like Islam or religion if people want to follow science and disregard religion? How can it fill that void? Because there are some research done that shows that people who are actively religious are happier than people who are not.
Right. So I would actually say oftentimes the more interesting question is in reverse, where science is not really making claims to provide answers to our, the spiritual yearnings, the social needs. They're really about, if here's the objective, how do we go test it or prove it or demonstrate it and so forth. So I think a more interesting spin on that is for people who are grounded in science, what are things that we can learn from other spiritual traditions, perhaps not taking them on wholesale with all of their claims, but are there facets that we can learn that complement our lives to round them out? I think if you're coming from a religious perspective, you're not really going to get, if you're looking outside of your religion to science to give you something, and you've acknowledged that your religion said something in contradiction, you've already created a conflict within yourself. Although if you're a religious person and you take the position that your religion, say Islam in this case, isn't really speaking to things that are scientific, and therefore you should complement your life with scientific advancements and scientific thinking, critical thinking, yeah, then that's great.
It seems there's like, I've heard it many times from my own experience. For example, my mom, her friends, they don't really know a lot about religion except from what, others tell them, but there's always this notion that they're not actually opposed to science as long as in their mind it confirms what they already believe in.
And that's a really good point. A lot of times, and I've grown up with this as well, a lot of Muslims that I've been surrounded by have said, you know, go seek out knowledge, you know, learn science and so forth. But as soon as you come in your studies, whether it's science or anything else, something that conflicts with Islam, then reject it. And I think this goes in the face of true inquiry, where you're starting with a preconceived conclusion in mind. I think that's a disingenuous way of living your life and of seeking knowledge. And I think oftentimes religion, unfortunately, teaches us to approach life that way. And I think we hold ourselves back from knowledge by not keeping an open mind, by not allowing ourselves to come to a conclusion that may not be comfortable or preconceived.
Thank you. I appreciate your time. I was going to you, so
Thank you.
you have the microphone now.
I think the question that we should all think about is that, for me, the view of science that I believe in is that a view that includes liberty, pluralism, and openness and acceptance. So the question is, and contribution to human happiness. Will science, you know, and religion, any religion, coexist? For me, yes, as long as both agree that there are concepts and principles that we should all abide by, and foremost of them, liberty for all, you know, and openness to questioning. So for me, when religious authority come and say, well, we have the privilege to know certain truths,